And if I see that the CEO is parked in front of the house and the clients have to walk 100 meters, and then they talk about, they sell me their customer centricity.
Welcome back to Season 2 of the Business Culture Podcast, a platform to learn through the power of context and story. It's great to be back with you. This season is all about impact. I'll be chatting to impact makers across industries and geographies to understand how they have made true impact on their customers, colleagues, and communities. In this episode, I got to chat with Monique Landman. Operating out of both the Netherlands and South Africa, Monique has worked both in the corporate space as well as smaller entities to really emphasize and leverage the power of emotional intelligence. She currently holds the position of Chief Empathy Officer of the PGA of South Africa. So Monique, what we always trying to do in the beginning of our podcast is try and give our listeners a little bit of context, and that's really just to provide those who perhaps are less in the know as to your journey or what you've kind of been up to. And what's interesting, I think, in terms of our previous chats, is how much you've learned along your different moments of your career. And I think it'd be lovely just to start with that, just to get a brief kind of overview of where you started in the early days of work and how you kind of find yourself in what you do now.
No, I think what's interesting is that I started my career when I was 17. I started working when I was 17. I didn't go to any university. I just wanted to get as quick as possibly out of the house. I'm not a very warm background, and I started working. And funny enough is I had two talents that I was aware of at that time. That was my ability to learn languages very quickly and very easily. And I noticed that I love serving and I love people. So I started working at a tourist information office, being 17, speaking 6-7 languages on a day. And funny enough, the more I got older and grew into my career, I know now that start was actually something, it was not an Ivy League university or a brand new, I started as a trainee with an exec, no, not of that, but being so grounded in tourism and in hospitality and working my way up very organically. So I started in tourism and in hospitality, worked as a receptionist at several hotels. And if there's one thing that I use every day in my work now, is that work and that experience as a receptionist. Because now if I go into an office or a meeting with a client who invites me, I always go half an hour earlier and I sit and I watch how people treat the receptionist, and then it tells me something about culture. And so it's funny, I'm now 54 years old, that I still go back to that moment how I started. Obviously, I did later in time, I went from tourism into communications, into event management, and then started my own company about 16 years ago, doing leaderships programs and executive events. And that is sort of a turning point as to where I'm now, that I saw having 200 top bankers in one room. I saw about leadership, I saw about transformation, and I saw what makes them really having a transformational experience or just listening into an event. And from there on, I started to interfere with the program, and that brought me to leadership today.
It's interesting how you speak about being at the front line in terms of the receptionist role and things like that, where you kind of are getting a first-hand experience of what human behavior is really about, and how different people kind of react to different situations. Do you think that's quite an integral part of anyone's journey? For example, that they, if they want to be in hospitality, for example, that they actually be a waiter to start with, or if they want to be in human dynamics, that they actually experience it firsthand, like, in the sense of being a receptionist, etc. Do you think that's an important part of anyone's journey to do?
Yeah, I think it's especially from a leadership perspective, leadership and culture, and ultimately serving your customer go hand in hand.
Mm.
So there is a famous example of a pharmaceutical company in the US, and their executives take turn at the reception desk every month because they want to know what clients come in, what people are they getting into their headquarters. And well, I often speak about the parking lot in front of the main entrance. And if I see that the CEO is parked in front of the house and the clients have to walk 100 meters, and then they talk about they sell me their customer centricity. I always take a photograph of that and I'll show them. I said, well, thank you for inviting me to talk about customer centricity, but let's talk about leadership first. Why do you want to park in front of the company? And so it's being staying grounded to your customers, to your end customers. If I worked a lot in banking and at executive level servicing those executives, and every time there was a new product or a project being launched, I always asked them the question, what does it do to the man in the street with his bank card at the ATM? That is the ultimate end customer. And so when is the last time that you actually went to an ATM? Or when is the last time that in a hospitality, for instance, when did you sleep in your own bed? So staying grounded is also about leadership, and it's also about getting to know the product and experiencing the product.
It's fascinating. I'm going to ask you a few questions on the different leaders that you've worked with in your time, but what I'm also interested to know is in your journey so far, you've obviously had some moments of deep learning, I suppose, where we've all had those moments and times where we've had to learn the hard way, and it's been at the same time one of our biggest times of growth as well because of that. Can you recall any specific instances or experiences where it was a real deep learning experience for you, or something where you were very much out of your comfort zone and something which was quite a tough situation to deal with?
Yeah, I think for me, personal and professional life go really hand in hand. That is in my journey the case. So I think I had about 2 or 3 really defining moments in life that changed me and shaped me into the person that I am today. And one was that at the age of 12, my mother passed away, and they came to collect me from school. So I had to cycle home, and I sort of cycled down the hill, and I saw the house, and I saw all these aunts and cars parked in front of the house. And what I did then, I saw that and I thought, oh no, they're expecting me to cry and they expect me to show all emotions, which was natural to be expected. But I choose not to. I actually made a choice on that bicycle, seeing the house, I'm not going to show anybody. I don't want that. And that resistance took me 40 years to get out of that guarded, out of my head, and really deeply connect to emotion and to heart. And funny enough, that when I discovered that, everything changes in my work, because then I noticed when I traveled or when I was in a hotel or in a restaurant or in work or doing those leadership days, I saw that a lot of people actually are guarded and distance themselves from uncomfortable human emotions. So I started changing my whole approach and actually seeing and recognizing that guarded feeling. And when you don't have that, magical things can happen. So that is sort of how it changed me into my professional life. And obviously it did miracles for my personal life. Finally opening up, being real, being vulnerable, sharing uncomfortable stuff. And the second experience is, I think it's part of the same sort of in that line, was when I burned out about 6 years ago. I was working for a strategic communication company doing the change practice. And I was so uncomfortable in that culture, in that ecosystem. And I was so guarded and so afraid. So made me feel so small that finally it was bound to happen. So I burned down and I recovered from that depression. And from that moment on, I decided to go downstream and not doing everything on willpower, just letting everything organically occur. Mm. And that was about 5 years ago. And then I started Unchain. I thought, this is about unlocking, help people in companies to be safe, to create leaders that actually unlock that in employees. And so it did miracles for my personal life, but also in my professional career. And I always speak about my own experiences. I think in change business, you really need to have an experience so transformational, because change is hard. It's messy. We are all messy, imperfect human beings. So at least I know now for myself that I am.
Yeah, I'd love to unpack change a little bit more, but before we get there, I was interested. You spoke earlier about, and you said that you find a lot of people are often guarded when you first encounter them. There are a lot more people than you thought that have that sort of guarded mentality. Where do you, in your opinion, where do you think that comes from? Where do you think that is created from? Because I don't think we're born guarded. We're not born as, we're not born pessimists, as they always say. We become pessimists. But in the same sense, I don't think we're initially born guarded. Where do you think that sort of mentality or that disposition sort of comes from?
Yeah, I think as a child, you learn to ride a bike and you fall off 20 times. And that's completely normal. So we're at that time, you're more, every focus, every failure you make is part of the learning curve. And nobody expects a child of 12 years old to be academic level. Or, you talk as parents about mistakes. And finally, in the line, when we go older, we lose that touch of we could say our inner child, that freedom that we feel to actually ask stupid questions or try out things or build a rocket out of paper and actually really believe that the rocket is going to launch. So in companies, what happens is when you start to work in an ecosystem, when they expect things of you and they only celebrate the achievements and not the efforts, or when there is a leadership who only focus on the process. So actually in a group where people are feeling peer pressure, that's where we sort of close down. And also human experiences, like, for instance, mine being an orphan at 12, or that humans are very, very uncomfortable with dealing uncomfortable stuff. We move away from disappointment, from frustration. We eat it, we drink it, we buy it, we party away so not to feel it. And actually, so we become more in the head, we become more disconnected from feelings. Well, actually, failures, mistakes, having life-changing experiences, when you move closer to yourself and you know what's happening and you actually accept it, then you become also more resilient person, because then when things go south, you're more likely to stay in your balance. So we move away from our emotions, from dealing with difficult stuff. We hardly sit on the couch all day. Well, actually, that data you get from a sad experience or even a happy experience, the data you can learn personally from that experience by moving further and moving closer to yourself. We lost that.
Do you think that, with that in mind, that answer, that when it comes to social media and the digital space, which has become such a prominent part of most of our lives, that's almost encouraging a lack of true human connection, or that there's people are not using opportunities to engage in a physical space because they'd rather do it in what they deem to be a safer space online, and that's sort of making us less able to run towards those fears, or run towards the difficult situations, or embrace those difficult feelings. What's your take on the sort of social media impact when it comes to that guarded nature?
Yeah, I think if you're unhappy in your skin and feeling depressed, as I suffered a severe depression, so I know how it feels. And you look on social media, you might find yourself thinking that everyone is having a happy life and that everything is perfect and that it has to be blue skies. You rarely see pictures of rainy situations with holidays being destroyed by rain, because that's not a cool thing to say. So that peer pressure on social media it's the same as in companies. If you have a company where the culture is up or out, you don't want to share your vulnerability because you'll be afraid. If all your friends on social media celebrate their greatest New Year's Eve with parties and glamorous lifestyle, and you're stuck at home alone, that makes you feel very, very sad. But and this is an example that I've for many, many years I always use New Year's Eve as an example, because that is the moment where you'll actually, like Christmas and holidays, that is so much a magnifying glass for people who don't have that or choose not to have that. But it makes you very vulnerable. And I think loneliness, and not only in companies, I call that corporate loneliness, but also in society, because of that online situation, because of our online reality and our digital, we completely are hyper connected, but we have more loneliness than ever, because the real in having a conversation, the real in hugging somebody, a hug could be so powerful to say, I feel it, I feel your pain. But that whole digital space in companies now with remote working as well, how can you build a team when everybody's behind Zoom? How can you still have honest conversations? Yeah. So I think it's definitely a threat, and more than ever, humanity and human connections are become a scarcity, yeah, and also an opportunity for businesses. If they do that right, they can fill up a void that is now occurring in society.
It speaks into what we're starting to chat about in terms of change, and I suppose the first truth that I suppose you and I both agree on many others is that people generally aren't good with change. They don't run towards change. They they like to I suppose live within a comfort zone or within the known and operate there, which I guess we're all guilty of to some extent in our lives. But what is the in your experiences with different companies, different people, different personalities, etc., what is the sort of starting point when it comes to changing the way a collective or an organization thinks and therefore does? What is the starting point for you when you go into a business or into a group of people in terms of starting that change process?
I think that what I always do is I observe a lot. And if I enter a company, an office building, a parking lot, as I said before, within minutes, I know what I have to do. I can see it instantly. By observing how do they treat the receptionist, how do they see the janitor, do they see the cleaning lady? So that is sort of I like to call it a sort of an empathy scan, like what is the undercurrent in this company. And for me, knowing what you want to change, it is, I try to bring in, I start with bringing in the energy, that it's inspiring, and by setting up a sort of signal towards the true north. This is, I choose my words very carefully, like words like, imagine if we're a year or ahead from here. Imagine if you're going to be a market leader. Words like trust, perspective, together. These are all soft, kind, warm words, safe words. But everything that all my workshops or conversations that I have from that starting point starts with vulnerability, but building a connection. And in teams, first time I need a team, or in leadership groups, or in boardroom even, I connect on a personal level. I make sure that the people I'm going to work with, and they have to do it together. I'm just a facilitator in that process, but I connect them to each other again. So I dissolved the barrier by asking personal questions like, what is your most defining moment in life? Or share about when are you at your best? So I have all, depending on the level and on the problem. But what I instantly see is that people have to start to get to know each other again. And when they're out of their head into their hearts, they're more likely to open up for new perspectives. So, it works miracles. I've seen magical things happen. And I'm always very nervous at the beginning because I think, oh, what if it doesn't work? What if it doesn't work? But it always does. So small groups, bigger groups, the moment people are opening up and dissolving a little bit of the barrier, the next barrier is more easy to resolve. And even doing innovation workshops on creativity, on finding new business models, I'm not going to start about strategic business model conversations. I asked them, what do you wish for your friends and family right now? And they open up about friends and family. And then you could see in their face finding a little bit relaxation. So they open up a bit. And in that space, you can work towards change. And then obviously there's the leader who has to set example. And the leader who has to unlock the new perspective. They have to move people into the new direction. And so obviously I spend a lot of time mentoring executives on that skill to do that, because that's part of the change. But it always happens by getting people out of their head into their hearts.
It sounds like, and you kind of summed it up so nicely there right at the end, it sounds like it's so important to get people into the right state, into the right psychological and obviously emotional state, so that they can actually unlock their potential. Because the way that I understood that last answer that you gave us is, a lot of the answers lie within these individuals, when it comes to innovation or whatever the case might be, but they're just not in the right state to unlock that potential, to unlock that answer. Is that a fair summary?
No, absolutely. If what you really want in every company, in every organization, even at your local tennis or golf club, in a group of members, you want people to share abundantly and free of themselves. You want people to share their hearts, their personality, giving them something of themselves to another person. So if you want people to work together, it is about willingness that they have for another human being to help. So it is a very human action that you actually want to do, either in a team or in a family. Being willing to give something of yourself and to unlock that potential. That starts with seeing people. And by seeing them and actually giving them this feeling of that they matter. So I did a change project in Joburg in a hotel very chic, classy hotel. And we sort of changed the proposition into being at a Joburg downtown, how do you say that? A garden, a retreat, almost downtown Centon, a sanctuary, that's the word. So I started with the gardeners because I said, I'm going to advise your leadership that I think this garden is the main, big, best thing of the hotel to sell. People will not stay in a 200-room hotel, for instance, but some people choose for small and intimate. Those people who come in here, your garden, you are the asset of the hotel. I spent, I think, just 4 hours with the whole team. They were cutting grass and I was walking around and I showed that to them, that idea. They started walking upright. They came in 5 minutes earlier to work. They showed me a week later, look, we cut the grass, and they felt that they are part of an experience. Same thing I did with housekeeping. The housekeeping said, no, we don't connect to the guests. But I woke up at 6 o'clock with them and we started cleaning the rooms. And I said to them, listen, you have the most intimate connection with the guest of everybody in a hotel because you know what's in their bin. You know if people have sex, you know if they are sick. You have the most intimate connection, although you don't see them. And they felt for the first time in their careers, in their personal or professional lives, they felt like I matter. You cannot believe the change only after 4 hours by making people feel good about what they do. And it doesn't matter if you're executive or at the end of the chain or cleaning. And I did the same with dishwashers, the scullers. I just spent 4 hours in their scullery.
Yeah, it's interesting how, on face level, it sounds like such a fundamental, rudimentary thing, but it actually it happens so seldom these days that people from top to bottom feel part of a organization, feel truly part of the collective. And it's interesting because it obviously starts from the top in terms of building a culture. And I think maybe the word prioritization of what's most important really comes to my mind in that when you as the leader of an organization prioritize what's most important in terms of building a culture, it seems maybe that the knowing around that or the understanding around that has been lost because, if a lot of these leaders or CEOs, etc., were doing it the right way around, then I think those housekeepers, those gardeners would obviously feel part of the woodwork, part of the team. What's your take on that? I mean, do you think that there has just been a lack of prioritization around what's really most important, or is there another reason?
No, I think that I think you're exactly right that they spend too much time behind closed doors in their offices doing reports, and the same. So the holding or the group demand all these reports from them. So that is like from executive level, they ask all general managers to constantly share reports and forecasts and numbers. And when is the last time you were in a hotel that you actually saw a general manager walking around or at a golf club? Or they are, and not, but many of them spend way too much in their office. And if they would come up in the morning, like the CEO of IKEA, for instance, he's famous for it. He always starts his day, every IKEA and anywhere in the world where he comes to, he starts at 5 o'clock in the morning before anyone else of that company is there. And he talks to the drivers who pack the truck in the morning. And he asked them, do we treat you right? Do you have good enough coffee? Because he knows that these guys transport their goods. So especially in hospitality, and I know there's always admin to do, and that's very understandable. But managing your customers, observing, talking to customers, spending time with housekeeping, I always say, like, at least of your 5-day work week, spend one day or 8-10 hours on the ground doing, like, how do we do our waste or the cleaning or whatever. Spend time with people. So that and that's not their fault. That is what their executives ask them to do.
Yeah.
So it's, the fish rots from the head. If that is what they have to do and to keep their jobs. But that is the especially in hospitality, walk around, talk to your guests, spend time in the dining room, come up with every morning. It's with the start of your team.
Yeah, absolutely. I think a lot of what we're touching on here is about curiosity in general human behavior. And I wanted to ask your opinion on this. You get some people that are, I think, like you and I, perhaps, that are very curious about human behavior, perhaps just naturally so. But do you think that it is something that can be the affinity for human behavior? Do you think it's something that can be, that it's nurtured, or is it just a nature element? Is it just part of your wiring? Is it something that can be cultivated or improved, in your opinion?
Oh yeah, I think that we're all born with a sense of curiosity. That is how we learned our skills through kindergarten and school, and we would climb into trees or build those paper rockets. So I think it's part in every human, because we're part of a tribe. We are not born as lone people. We're not an island, So I think it's in human nature to be connected to everybody else. And again, I think that in that whole, what you see in society now, being disconnected to what's real. You have a dinner party, you sit with 10 friends, and the conversation could easily go into success, money, status, making impression, even on your friends, even on your close friends. And during a dinner, if you become aware of that situation, you have a choice to change it. Mm-hmm. Sometimes, when I found myself in this situation, I know I think for myself, if I continue this conversation, well, I have a beautiful evening and we have laughter and it's nice. But if I ask or share something really personal, what's bothering me, I could change the whole course of the dinner. And I take a deep breath, because it's, sometimes it comes unnatural to me too. So I find myself a little bit of courage, and then I'll ask a different question. And when you are aware of that, you have a choice, and you can change business conversations. You can, when somebody gives you feedback, which is hard to swallow, and you'll instantly find yourself being guarded because you close. But if you are able to see that there is a difference between the reaction you get from that, the way you respond, so you can actually feel miserable about the feedback, but you still have a choice to respond differently. Mm. So and this is something that has been part of my every workday life, but also my personal life. Open heart is an open mind. So it is about being present, not being on your phone when you're having a conversation at the same time. When you walk into your office, sometimes in one of I mentor a client right now, and he lost complete connection with heart, and so I said to him, so every morning, your first meeting, for the rest that happened 2 weeks ago. So every morning you go into the office, and the first meeting, you're going to make a heart connection, a real connection. So no matter if it's the first person you see on the parking lot, or the meeting, or your first Zoom call, you make yourself aware of, I have to open up my heart and dissolve a barrier. And when that barrier is dissolved, the whole day will change. Then you'll have honest conversations. People were more likely to share, hey, Rob, I don't know, I gave you this assignment, but I'm nervous, or I don't want you to talk to my people because I'm scared what they're going to say about me. that is what you really want, to unlock that and to unchain that openness.
It's interesting when you talk about that and that you ask that individual to do that one little thing at the beginning of the meeting. It rings a bell in my mind about the difference between sort of incremental change and trying to do everything, in one go, try to all of a sudden become something completely different overnight, which I think most people agree on is very difficult to do, if not impossible. Do you find that, the way that humans have become less and less patient makes change more difficult, in the sense that, incremental change does take time and it is a process, but people want kind of results yesterday. And, I suppose instant gratification and digital and all these things have made our patience less and less. Do you think that that's making change more difficult, in the sense of, in terms of the role of being a change management specialist?
Well, I think it is true. I mean, this big change. If for my whole life, I struggled with losing weight, gaining weight. I even wrote a book on it a few years ago. About the struggle is real. But so I'm 54 years old. I still don't have the magical answer. Sometimes it's going right, and sometimes I struggle. But in companies, when your goal is to change customer experience, and you want a Booking.com 10, an average or increase from, let's say, Booking.com, you have a guest reviews and you want from 7 to 8, which sounds like a small change, but actually that means that every action throughout the company, all those small daily actions all together will drive the change. But if you only focus on that number, and you're more likely to only pay attention to the end result and the achievement, while at the same time, changing a culture, what leads automatically to a 10 on Booking.com, if you pay attention to everyday efforts and celebrating those efforts, paying attention to it, unlocking it, sharing best practices, you will see that the process is the change. And it's not about the 8, but it's about all those small things. So when you're doing it, you're not seeing it. That's going to the gym for the first time. You sweat for 6 weeks. Nobody will notice. You'll feel better, but only after 3 months, people will start to see the difference. But at the same time, you've been feeling super well for 3 months. So if you only focus on that number on the scale, you might overlook that you have been feeling amazing fit for 3 months and feeling proud of yourself. And as I said to you at the beginning, I'm doing this cold water challenge now. If I only focus on being in water at 0 degrees, I forget that I've actually been in that water every morning for the past week. So and I've noticed that the process is the change, because in that process, beautiful things happen. People will feel proud of themselves. They will go home and walk up more straight. They will look other people in the eye. You're growing a sense of confidence. What I do with groups in South Africa, especially groups who lack confidence. And I said, well, every night I have them in a team for 5 days, for instance. So tonight you're walking home, and one of your assignments is you have to look somebody in the eye. And then they come in next morning and they say, well, I'm so scared I didn't do it. And it's okay, then okay, you're going to do it today. And so what happens on day 4 or 5, they come home and said, at first they looked strangely at me. But then people are started making chats or saying hello. So if you do that 10 days, they're more likely to have beautiful encounters and have more confidence in themselves. So you're working on a huge transformational experience in your company. Well, the magic is happening every day.
Yeah, it's amazing how true I believe what you say is there, and about firstly the process, but I think just those little things, and it sparked something in my memory of this notion of the intention that we put out to other people, in the sense that, we often, intention can be misconceived or misperceived, and that we might not just be not confident, but the perception that's put out, or the intention that is felt from the other person, is that we're being arrogant, or that we don't want to talk to them. But actually it's a confidence issue on our side, for example. And a lot of people often get misinterpreted like that, whether they're walking past someone in the street, or whether it's in a company where they think, oh, this, that person's really not a nice person. They don't ever want to talk to me, or they look like they're just so arrogant. But actually it's something that sits as a confidence issue in their own mind and heart. Do you think do you find that quite often being the case, that people's, what they put out isn't actually what they intend to put out, but it's the way that it's interpreted from other people?
Oh yes, if you know this feeling of being guarded, what happens in your brain, your amygdala, blows up, and there's a lot of things stress in your head. So the whole brain, flight and fight. When you have a profound lack of confidence, you'll feel like a little deer on the Kalahari plain, because you'll feel like you're being attacked all the time. Well, at the same time, if you are confident and grounded and really feeling this profound groundedness of that, you can always go back to, okay, but I'm okay. I'm good. So what happens is that there is a lot of misunderstanding. There's a lot of, because people interpreted signals. That moment, this is a lovely example from Brené Brown, from her TED Talk or her Netflix talk. And I resonated that so deeply with that. You send somebody a message, a little bit of a difficult message, and you can see that they read the message, and you can see that they're typing. And in that moment, you make up stories. In that moment, no matter how confident you are, if you're a little bit out of balance or you feel guarded, you're more likely to come up with stories. And that is okay. That is what we humans do. But then if you have a culture where you can ask the question, say, "Hi, I wondered why you responded that, because it made me feel like I was not good enough, or it made me feel like I failed you." And then somebody could say, "Oh no, that's not the case." Our deep purpose in life but also our longing in life to be recognized, to be seen, to be appreciated. That is what we all have in common. But that's something that is so deep below the water. I always use that iceberg. You see behavior above the water, but actually under the water, there's all these beliefs and experiences that made us that way. But the more you connect on a deeper level, you'll find common ground deep under that surface. Yeah. And if you have an ability to connect on that level, you will automatically also recognize that when somebody behaves rude, or when somebody lashes out, that is not about that they are, that's not about you, but it's something that they might feel lonely, or they might feel rejected by you.
Yeah. I also find that, and perhaps you do as well, is that there's a difference in companies, in cultures, and in individuals when it comes to the ability to deal with conflict or deal with friction. So, you read up that you get good friction and bad friction. Every company or collective of people needs to have friction at some point in order to move forward. But it's in the way that they deal with that friction, or how they use it from a learning point of view, that actually, differentiates the good from the great, in a sense. Do you find that there is a glaring difference between cultures that deal well with conflict and those which almost veer away from it because they don't know how to deal with it in general? And is that a leadership function? Do you think that's something which is steered strongly from the leadership?
No, I think that I don't know numbers, but in most of the companies, conflict is creating so much barriers and creating so much, I call that silent grief. There is so much silent loneliness and grief in a company because of not dealing with conflicts. So sometimes you think the company has a very warm culture and they're so kind, but they're not very clear. So from a leadership perspective, if you're not clear about your expectations or what they expect from you, that's very unkind, actually. So they act like it's been kind, and they send you flowers on your birthdays, and they celebrate moments. And so from the outside, on the other side of the glass, it all looks very kind, but it's actually cruel. It is a cruel thing when you have a company where people are not feel free to actually share that experience, where feedback becomes such a big thing that people feel like they failed. And you cannot believe how often I have this conversation that I tell people, you made a mistake, but you are not a mistake. And creating, especially, I think one of the best tests you can have on your company culture is by asking yourself, or in a leadership, or how do we deal with failures, with mistakes, with feedback? Because from that same Gardner feeling that people lost a little bit of their confidence, feedback comes in so hard. And they have, so there's, the annual performance review. People are so scared of their performance review because they haven't seen their manager for a whole year. And always there is a moment where you have to talk about, you'll have to held accountable for what you do, which is because you get salary paid. It's very normal that people are paid to do a job, and companies can ask, that's what they pay you for, to do it right and to do it better. But if you have a culture where conflicts are hidden under the carpet, or where people are even being bullied because of all this lack of understanding, that is where you often see that in executive level, they do the same. In their boardroom, they don't speak up loud. They're in their leadership bubble. They have egos. So they don't want to hear actually what people really have to say. And let me really stress out by saying that feedback is tough. I mean, for no matter how good and confident you are, it's hard. It's because we all want to be loved. And I loved the article that's been published recently about Shakespeare. Shakespeare really struggled from imposter syndrome. He really thought that he was doing a bad job. And then he learned about zooming into, why do I feel so threat about when somebody writes things about me and not everybody likes his writing? And what we could really learn from that example is that when you zoom into feedback, into why do I get so stressed out about failure, if you ask deeper, you'll see you're afraid to make mistakes because you're afraid to be rejected. And why are you afraid to be rejected? Because deep down, we want to be loved. But the moment you realize that that's where your fear of failing comes from, you can look at your private life and say, but hey, there's no reason to feel that because I have friends. Doesn't mean a lot of friends, but I'm happily married. So I am loved, and I don't need to be loved by everybody. And that I always zoom into my conversations about that, making sure that people see where it comes from, and then showing and having an open conversation and creating safety where this can happen in companies. I mean, Rob, that is amazing when you get a level in a team to have this honest conversation.
I feel like we've come full circle around why leaders then are guarded, as to the fact that they have that fear inherent in them as well, because they want to be respected and admired and loved from their staff, and I think the more one opens up, the more you put yourself in danger of being perceived as weak or not of the historic or legacy viewed leadership capability. And it's interesting because it's almost, as you're alluding to, it's almost the opposite, in that people tend to respect those who are willing to give an open heart to the staff and to the team.
And the fact that I earn money with mentoring executives is the fact that they also feel loneliness, which are called corporate loneliness, because they struggle. And there is one important factor in leadership, and that's ego. And ego is a nasty thing, because once it's been tickled, it wants more. So it's like it grows. As soon as you feed it, it grows. And what it does eventually, when you grow into a rise in your ranks, people are want to please you. So they're more likely to say what you want to say. So it's like carrying a target around you that people are easily find to know your sweet spot, because if they know that they can touch you on that spot, you'll feel, as a leader, you'll feel good about yourself. But eventually, over time, when that happens, you completely lose contact with your people, because eventually that power, that sense, that sweet sense of, it's very addictive. It only wants to be fed with the good things. So you're not open for feedback anymore.
So you're basically saying that if a team member or your subordinate or whatever you want to call it, if you ask them a question as the leader, and they're just saying what you want them to say, or what they think that you want them to say, they're never going to give you the truth, which is actually where the change can happen, where improvements can be made.
And that is spot on, because your behavior becomes corrupted, because people will know how to manipulate you. And I often talk about emotional intelligence in leadership. And what happens is you have to create your own resistance. You have to create in your company a group of people who you really invite that resistance in to keep you grounded. And because if you are in the bubble and people are hiding things from you, and they hide their mistakes from you. Beautiful example of a leader on Wall Street who got the feedback that people were afraid of him. And he was so shocked, because he really didn't know that people are afraid of him. So what he did is he wanted to be more empathic, and he wanted to adapt and embrace that emotional intelligence. So he went to a country where he didn't speak the language at all, in an Asian country where he was so uncomfortable with, because he didn't know, he could not read anything or listen to it. So he forced himself to look into body language. He really had to zoom in. How do people respond to me? That was very interesting way of, you asked me before, how can people learn things? So this is for things, but you can start by asking everyone in your team about feedback. How do I do? Do you feel safe to? So inviting feedback, inviting resistance. You need to make sure you're grounded in your company. Other than that, you're not likely to do change. And in these uncertain times, you want to move people, your employees, into a new direction, especially now. So you need to inspire them, and you want them to follow you, not as blindly, but follow you because you're having a sense of perspective.
Yeah, it's amazing how it's almost the opposite to what so many people think, in that the achievement of having a subordinate want to follow you and want to challenge you in a respectful way is actually the greatest level that you can reach as a leader, as opposed to what the legacy feeling is, where they felt that was a show of disrespect, or they felt that someone challenging the leader was a show that they didn't respect that individual, whereas it's actually, in this case, them feeling comfortable, safe in this space where they feel like they can respectfully disagree with a view of the leader or a
absolutely.
An approach or whatever.
And the best trait for a good leader is to start with self-awareness. That's the basic of every emotional intelligent process people go in. Know thyself. Because if you know yourself, if you know what lashes you out, or what makes you tick, or what makes you escalate or de-escalate, that knowledge about yourself, why do you respond that way? And from that, you can regulate yourself more, so you can control your impulses. If you're mad at your team because they screw up, you have to control that emotion, because it's not effective if you want your team to do better next time. If you shout, they're not going to do anything better, because they'll be afraid and they become guarded. So if you want in a company to innovate, you want people to step out of comfort. You want people to come up with bad ideas, with good ideas, but you want new ideas. But if you shout at them because they had a bad idea, next time they will become more process-orientated or task-orientated. And that whole self-regulation is super important. And if you have an empathy, which is also a very big part and a driver of emotional intelligence, if you know about your employees and really know them, what it is to be in their shoes, what it is to confront customers every day who are always mad because your customer service is not in order. If you can zoom into their reality, each individual situational, so like, the team members who are good under stress, when there is a crisis, you know who to ask. But the ones who are not good at stress, they might be brilliant at controlling or maintaining a sort of a quality. So the better you know about your employees, the better and the more effective you are in your company. People always mistake it for weakness, but it's called intelligence for a reason. The knowledge you get by zooming into your clients, the knowledge you get makes you outperform your company way better and make your team become high performing.
It sounds like what you've said in our conversation today is that the really good leaders are those which are truly conscious and present in the ecosystem in which they work. They are willing they ask insightful questions for the reason to understand, not just to respond. They try and understand the inner workings of the people that are within their teams, so that they don't just take one size to fit all. Do you think that's a fair view on it? Is consciousness a really important part of a leader's ultimate success?
No, absolutely. Knowing about the people you work with, about no matter how tough the decisions you have to make. I mean, it's not that you become weak because you know about their, and you can look at them with compassion and you can understand what's driving them. Doesn't hold you back from taking tough decisions. But can you imagine when you have, for instance, you have to restructure? Tough decision. Every leader, if you have a bit of a conscience, you'll find that very tough. But if you know how impactful that is, you cannot change the message, but you can at least change the way, with so much care and compassion, you communicate that message. Because there's also the group who stays behind, because these are the group who stay in a company and have to drive the change after everybody's left, after restructuring. So when you're being in that whole process, being not with care and compassion, but just by implementing a strategy, you'll create a minefield from the people who leave behind, because they're become so guarded, so afraid, so they're mourning for the loss of their colleagues. So if you zoom into that and you pay attention to humans that are and the impact on their lives, the compassionate type of leadership style you'll have from there will also make your company better afterwards, and makes you, if you want to move people from a change perspective, really to accept the new perspective, you have to inspire them. And in this, especially now, post-COVID, bad economy, there's a lot of cynicism in companies. Especially now, you have to touch in and really check in with human emotion, because that is how you inspire your company and your people to do better.
Do you think that human emotion, that connection piece that you've just chatted about now, is going to be the differentiator between companies in the future? Do you think that will set apart those who really achieve their potential as an organization?
Oh, I absolutely believe that. I think that from a good company to a great company, it's about the ability to touch in with humanity. It's very strategic, but if you look at societal relevance, as we spoke about, we know that, and it was something that we touched in earlier. So we know that people are guarded. We know that people are in their heads all the time. We know that people fear mistakes and failure. So if in your company you can create or unchain humanity in your business, where people can actually start to a little bit let go and to dissolve some barriers between people, you're going to drive a customer experience that is out of this world good. Especially into hospitality or in leisure, or what you really want is people to feel free to give the best of themselves when they speak to guests, no matter what function you are in the hotel. But if they share that personality with you and they pay attention and they give the best of themselves, you get amazing experiences, transformational experiences. And especially now, knowing that people are worried for health and their wealth, and so I think that even now, after post lockdown, post COVID, or we're still in it actually, people have become so afraid of losing their jobs, of losing family, their health, and now you come into work, and you have to give the best of yourself. How is that possible that even at your work, people don't see you or take you, you're for real?
Yeah.
But make no mistake, it's not weak. It's very, very strategic.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more on that. I wanted to ask you on a more personal level, which is a question we always ask our guests to try and understand how we differ a little bit better as people, as individuals. If you could visit one restaurant for the rest of your life, which one would it be, and why?
I think that restaurants should be a restaurant where they always, for the rest of my life, welcome me with my name. Mm-hmm. A restaurant that keeps up innovating. So if I come there every 6 weeks or every 6 months, I want to change menu. Mm-hmm. I want to see in that type of restaurant that they are relevant, that now dairy or meat is, especially after COVID, it's not very attractive. So I want a menu that has more vegan components. But at the end of the day, it's all about the humans. They will have my loyalty for the rest of my life if they treat me with their own unique personalities, if they win my heart every time I get there, but also that they recognized it, that I came the year before, that is a type of restaurant where I always would go back to.
Yeah, it's interesting how different people, some are more foodie people, some people are more about the wine, and some people are more about the human element of the experience. So I tend to sit in the same area as you do when it comes to that, I think. But yeah, it's lovely to chat, Monique, and I really appreciate the time and the insights. I'm also curious to know for our listeners is how can they get in touch with you if they want to take the conversation further, or if they want to hear more about what you do. How can our listeners get in touch with you?
I have my company is both in the Netherlands and in South Africa. So usually I'm 2 weeks per week in South Africa or 2 weeks per month. So I shift a bit of my time, but my profile's on LinkedIn. I don't do websites because I feel that's not active. So I have a social profile on LinkedIn on Monique Landman, and I'm sure that they can ask you for my contact information. But I'm glad to be able to fly back to South Africa next month. So I was probably the first to book a flight again.
That's it for today, guys. If this episode brought you value, please do subscribe to the podcast series. And for more information on building your organizational culture, visit us at rcaconsulting.biz. We'll see you in the next episode.